let's dive in. Does this sound familiar? You feel completely stuck with your English. You've maybe spent years in classrooms, you can read pretty complex stuff, maybe you even ace those grammar tests. But then the moment a real conversation starts, like someone asks you an open-ended question, all that language you thought you knew just evaporates.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of understanding English perfectly well when you're reading or listening, but then being totally paralyzed when it's your turn to speak. That gap is a huge, frustrating pain point for so many learners everywhere.
It really is.
It's the classic bottleneck, isn't it?
Yeah.
In language acquisition, it means you've successfully learned English, maybe like a school subject,
right,
but you haven't managed to integrate it yet as a tool you can actually use. Knowing the rules, the theory, that's one thing, but internalizing the rhythm, the flow, making it automatic, that's where the real breakthrough comes.
Exactly. Well, today we're aiming for a complete overhaul on that. We've gathered all this fantastic source material, your notes, your research, and our mission here is to really extract and analyze what looks like 12 really powerful, effective strategies, the goal, to help you transform your English skills fast, moving from just academic knowledge to, real-world fluency. These aren't just generic tips either.
No, these are battle-tested strategies. They tackle the core cognitive barriers head-on. And that transformation is so important because when you really commit to improving your language skills, you're not just aiming for like a better test score. You are fundamentally opening up your world.
Yeah.
Your personal life, your professional life.
Yeah.
Means better job opportunities, maybe access to higher education, travel that's genuinely meaningful, and just overall personal growth. It accelerates everything.
Totally.
And what's great about these 12 methods we're digging into is how accessible they are. They're practical tools, things you can start using right now on your own. You don't necessarily need to sign up for expensive courses or, hire private tutors.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
So the core theme for our whole conversation today really revolves around shifting your perspective, right?
Why?
We need to help you move English from being this subject you study now and then.
Right, like homework.
Exactly. Into something you consistently and naturally do. It needs to become a habit, just part of your daily routine. So let's start by diving deep into that foundation. How you can optimize your daily input and really immerse yourself.
Yeah, and if we're talking foundations, we absolutely have to start with the non-negotiable requirement for learning any skill, really, but especially language, consistency.
Yeah. Okay, let's unpack this first one then. Establishing consistency. It sounds simple, but I think a lot of learners fall into a trap here. They assume that, more effort equals more progress. So they might cram a huge study session, maybe 3 hours every Saturday.
The weekend warrior approach.
Yeah. And they think that's going to lead to great strides. But the source material we looked at makes a really strong case, backed by evidence, that this approach is fundamentally flawed.
It is flawed. And it's flawed because of how our memory actually works. The sources are quite clear. Just 15 minutes of focus practice, but every single day. That's actually superior, much better for retention and habit formation than doing 3 hours just once a week.
Okay, why is that? What's the neurological reason? Because that contrast feels important.
It's critical. Language learning relies really heavily on something called memory consolidation. And that process, it happens most effectively while you sleep.
Ah, okay. So when you cram for 3 hours on a Saturday, your brain's working overtime trying to encode all this massive amount of new information.
Exactly, it's overloaded.
And then by, say, Tuesday or Wednesday, a lot of the detail has just faded away.
Precisely. It hasn't had time to properly consolidate and stick. But when you give yourself that 15-minute daily dose, you're consistently firing up the neural pathways linked to English. You're basically reminding your brain frequently, hey, this stuff is important. It leverages what we call the spaced repetition system.
Right. Little and often.
Little and often. This consistent daily exposure forces your brain to adapt to the rhythm of English, to sort of keep the language active in the background processing. If you only visit the language once a week, you end up spending most of that time just trying to remember what you forgot since last time.
Instead of building new knowledge.
Exactly. You're constantly backtracking instead of moving forward.
So what does that look like in practice then? Are we talking about really small habits, micro habits?
Yes, absolutely. The sources suggest setting up small, predictable routines, things that anchor the language into your day. It could be as simple as reading one short news article in English while you have your morning coffee, or maybe listening to an English podcast for just those 15 minutes on your commute.
Or before bed, maybe.
Or before bed. Perfect. These little anchors ensure English isn't just an occasional visitor you have to prepare for. It becomes an integrated, constant presence. And that maintains the momentum you really need to develop automaticity.
Maintaining that constant presence. That leads us perfectly into the next insight, doesn't it? Something that often gets maybe overlooked in traditional adult language classes, the primacy of listening.
Oh, definitely.
This strategy seems to flip the usual script. You know, the methods that might push grammar worksheets or silent reading first.
Listening is, without a doubt, the bedrock, the foundation of good speaking. Just think about how we acquire our first language. Babies spend, what, a year? Maybe more. Just listening, soaking it all in before they even attempt a single coherent sentence.
That's true.
So before you even hope to speak English naturally, fluently, you absolutely must internalize how native speakers actually use the language in real time. Not just how a textbook simplifies it for exercises.
So when we talk about listening goals, we're going beyond just basic comprehension, like understanding the gist of it. It's more active than that.
Oh, much more active. Focused listening. When you listen actively, you're tuning into more than just the words. You're focusing on maybe three critical things. First, the tone and the intent, the emotion behind the words. Is the speaker being sarcastic, enthusiastic, annoyed?
Nuances.
Crucial nuances. Second, pronunciation. Especially those subtle vowel sounds or stress patterns that might not even exist in your native language. And third, and this is maybe the most critical for sounding fluent in the real world, how words connect.
You mean like how native speakers don't always say every single word perfectly clearly?
Exactly. They rarely articulate every word cleanly and separately. They use reduced sounds. They link words together, what linguists sometimes call liaisons.
Like saying gonna instead of going to.
Precisely.
Or what ya doing instead of what are you doing. Or blending tell him into something like tell him.
Yes. All those little connections and reductions. If you only ever listen to that slow, carefully articulated speech designed for learners.
Like in language apps sometimes.
Right. You just won't be prepared when you encounter that fast, blended, natural speech in a movie or a work meeting or just chatting with someone.
You'll feel lost.
You will. Your brain needs massive amounts of exposure. We're talking thousands of hours, ideally, to these natural patterns. Only then will your subconscious start to absorb and eventually replicate those structures, those rhythms. If you skip this deep listening phase, your own speech will likely always sound a bit stiff or maybe fragmented because you're trying to assemble sentences piece by piece using bits that weren't designed to stand alone like that.
Okay, that deep listening requirement leads us perfectly to the next strategy, which is all about using entertainment effectively. Strategy number 3, subtitles and stepping away. The sources seem to suggest a very specific, two-phase approach for using English movies and TV series.
Yes, it's a structured approach. Phase 1 is essentially the bridge. And it's really important, especially if you're a visual learner or if you're still building up your receptive vocabulary. You start by watching English content, but with the English subtitles turned on.
English subtitles, not native language.
Crucially, yes, English subtitles. This is incredibly effective because it instantly links the sound your ear is processing with the written form of the word on the screen. It helps confirm what you think you heard, it reinforces spelling, and it makes sure that when you hear that word again later without the text, the neural connection is already stronger. It's solidified.
But I can see a potential pitfall here. Learners could easily get stuck in phase 1, right? Just relying on those subtitles forever.
That's the danger.
Which kind of defeats the purpose of really sharpening the pure listening skills.
Exactly. And that's why phase 2 is the necessary leap. It's like taking the training wheels off the bike. You absolutely must challenge yourself. Watch similar content, maybe even re-watch something you already saw with subtitles, but this time without any subtitles at all.
Ooh, that sounds tough.
It is tough, but it forces your auditory processing center, your brain's listening circuits, to work much, much harder. You're training yourself to handle the real speed of conversation, the variety of accents you'll encounter globally, and that natural, sometimes messy, flow of speech. The kind that often leaves learners feeling completely overwhelmed when they don't have that visual crutch of the text to fall back on.
So it's really about forcing active processing, making your brain work to anticipate words, fill in the gaps, which is exactly what has to happen in a live, unscripted conversation.
Precisely. It builds auditory resilience. And if we sort of zoom out from these specific input tactics, they all collectively support our next major point, which is more of a mindset shift. thinking of English as a lifestyle.
Right. This moves English way beyond just being, that subject you had to take in school.
Yeah, the idea that English is something you study for an hour, then put away on a shelf until next time, that's incredibly limiting.
Totally. So what does the source material suggest for really integrating English into your life, making it a lifestyle?
It's all about utilitarian application. Using English for everyday, low-stakes tasks. The practical examples are often surprisingly simple, but they add up. Things like change your phone's language setting to English. Change your computer's OS language.
Oh, that's a good one. You can't avoid it then.
Exactly. You're forced to engage with English every time you check the weather, open an app, navigate menus. It's constant, low-level exposure.
What else?
Well, if you follow content creators on social media, YouTube, Instagram, whatever, intentionally seek out and follow English-speaking ones, especially in areas you're already interested in, like cooking or gaming or travel or fitness.
So you're getting input on topics you actually care about.
Right. And start writing simple everyday things in English, your grocery list, your daily to-do list. Use English for directions in Google Maps.
Little things.
Tiny things, but they accumulate. It transforms the language from something you passively learn about into something you actively use to manage your life. This increased, constant, low-stakes usage makes English feel far more functional, more natural, which is ultimately the subconscious goal for fluency, isn't it?
Yeah.
It basically creates an immersion environment for yourself, even if you live thousands of miles away from the nearest English-speaking country.
Okay, so section 1 really nailed down the need for consistent, conscious input and creating that immersive lifestyle. Now, we need to shift gears a bit into section 2, focusing more on what happens internally. How do we actually process all that input and start actively rewiring our own thought patterns?
Yes, internalizing the structure and changing cognitive habits. And our first internal strategy here is something we could call the kinetic link, the power of reading aloud. This isn't passive reading. This is a highly active drill, specifically designed to bridge the gap between reading comprehension and actual speech production.
Okay, that's a really key distinction the source material highlights, isn't it? Silent reading is great for understanding and maybe reading faster.
Absolutely, for comprehension.
But reading aloud is specifically for active physical speaking practice. Why does that work so much better than, say, just mentally rehearsing vocabulary? What's the mechanism?
When you read aloud, you're engaging two really critical systems at the same time. Systems that often feel disconnected for learners: your tongue and your ears. Your tongue is physically practicing the movements, the muscle coordination needed for proper pronunciation, for rhythm, for intonation. You're building muscle memory, motor memory.
Like playing an instrument.
Exactly like practicing scales. And at the very same instant, your ears are getting immediate auditory feedback on what you just produced. You become your own first listener, your own first corrector. It allows for instant, often subconscious, adjustments to your tone, your timing, your sounds.
So it takes the language from being just an abstract idea in your head to a concrete physical skill you're actively performing.
Precisely. And the source material suggests taking this even further, using simple tech you already have, like your phone. The self-improvement loop here can be really powerful. Record yourself reading a short passage, maybe an article you just read silently or a paragraph from a book.
Okay.
Then listen back to your recording and compare it critically to how a native speaker reads either the same text, if you can find it, or just a similar style of text.
The comparison is the key part.
It is. Don't just listen for general fluency. Listen for specifics. Where did your pauses feel unnatural or too long? Did you nail that tricky vowel sound? Did you link words together smoothly? Or did it sound choppy? This direct comparison allows you to quickly pinpoint specific phonetic issues or rhythmic patterns that need work, instead of just vaguely feeling like you don't sound right and waiting weeks for a teacher to maybe point it out.
That makes sense. Get that immediate feedback loop going. Okay, so once your tongue starts cooperating a bit more through reading aloud, the next big internal challenge, maybe the biggest, is tackling that constant mental roadblock. Which brings us to strategy number 5, escaping the translation trap. You mentioned this earlier. It slows down almost every non-native speaker.
It's the great fluency killer.
Yeah.
And arguably the biggest source of speaking anxiety. When you constantly rely on thinking first in your native language, forming the whole complex idea there, and then trying to do a real-time, word-for-word translation into English as you speak, you're imposing a massive cognitive load on yourself.
And that's what causes those awkward pauses, right? The umming and ahing, the losing your train of thought, the drop in competence mid-sentence.
Absolutely. You slow down because your brain is constantly switching context, juggling two languages. And often, the sentences you produce sound, well, unnatural. They might be grammatically correct, but sound overly formal or stiff, or you might use idioms from your language that just don't translate or make sense in English.
So the solution isn't just stop translating, because how do you even do that?
Right. It's not just about stopping. It's about deliberately practicing thinking directly in English, building that muscle.
Okay, how does someone actually start doing that? It still sounds a bit abstract. Think in English. What's the first step?
It starts with training your inner voice, your internal monologue. The sources suggest starting really small and immediate. Begin by internalizing simple, functional thoughts directly in English, especially during mundane, everyday activities. As soon as you wake up, maybe?
Like what?
Simple stuff. Like, okay, I need to brush my teeth, or this coffee is hot, or, right, I need to leave in 10 minutes. I wonder what the weather's like.
Just narrating your immediate reality in English inside your head.
Exactly. Or planning the next small action. I'm going to get dressed now. I should check my email. These simple, daily, internal monologues are the core training ground. They build the cognitive habit, the muscle, needed for generating thoughts instantaneously in English, completely bypassing that native language middleman.
Okay, that makes it much more concrete. Start small, start internal. Got it. That focus on immediate applied knowledge seems to connect really well to the next point about vocabulary. Strategy 6, building vocabulary in context. I think we've all been there, myself included, trying to memorize long lists of words using flashcards or apps. The source material suggests this is, well, largely ineffective for actually using the words.
It's very ineffective for long-term retention and especially for application. Isolated word lists fail because your brain has no anchor points for those words. If I just show you the word ephemeral on a blank white flashcard, okay, your brain might momentarily store the definition lasting for a very short time. But there's no situation, no emotion, no sensory detail attached to it. It's just floating there. So it tends to just float away. Retention is typically very poor.
And even if you do remember the definition?
Right. Even if you do, you probably won't have a clue how to actually use the word naturally in a sentence. What prepositions does it take? What kind of context does it fit?
So the context solution is about giving the word a place to live, basically, a situational home.
That's a great way to put it. Exactly. You learn new words best when they are embedded within a specific memorable situation. For example, maybe you hear the word exasperated while watching a sitcom, and you see the characters sigh heavily and roll their eyes after their kids make a huge mess.
Okay, yeah.
That situation, the visual image, the character's clear emotion, the context of the scene creates a really robust multi-sensory link in your brain for the word exasperated, much stronger than just a definition.
So when we encounter a new word, say in that sitcom, the advice isn't just to write down exasperated, annoyed.
Absolutely not. The specific instruction from the sources is crucial here. When you note down a new word, always include the full sentence or phrase where you found it. Maybe even add a quick note about the situation, sitcom dad reacting to messy kids. That sentence, that scenario, that's the memory hook. It ensures the word actually sticks in your long-term memory. And, crucially, it teaches you the grammar, the typical collocations, the prepositions you need to use that word correctly yourself later in conversation.
That makes so much sense. It's about the structure around the word, not just the word itself. Which leads us perfectly into the next key strategy. Number 7, learning phrases, not just words. If context gives vocabulary meaning, it sounds like learning in chunks gives speech its natural flow.
This is honestly one of the most critical leaps you can make towards sounding truly fluent. It's a game changer. If you really stop and observe natural, native speech, listen closely, you'll notice people don't assemble their conversations one word at a time. They don't. They rely overwhelmingly on prefabricated chunks of language. These can be idioms like bite the bullet. They can be phrasal verbs like look forward to or run out of, or they can just be common combinations, formulaic sequences like as far as I know, or could you do me a favor, or to be honest, or I'm tied up right now.
Right, and if a learner is still mentally trying to build every sentence from scratch word by word, they're going to sound really halting, maybe even mechanical.
And slow. Definitely slow. The huge fluency benefit of learning and using these chunks, these phrases, is speed and naturalness. You essentially stop needing to calculate the grammar in real time for those common structures. Instead of thinking, okay, subject I, verb am, adverb very, adjective busy, preposition at, determiner this, noun moment.
Which takes ages.
Ages. You just instantly access and deploy the single complete unit. I'm tied up right now. Boom! That phrase comes out as one pre-packaged chunk. It makes your English sound far more authentic, much smoother, and it eliminates those awkward pauses where you're searching for the next word or second-guessing your grammar.
You're shifting from being a sentence constructor to being more like a sentence deployer, pulling the right chunk off the shelf.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You're deploying ready-made units.
Okay, brilliant. So we've now covered consistent input, immersion as a lifestyle, and these really sophisticated internal processing strategies, reading aloud, ditching translation, context for words, and learning in chunks. It feels like it's time to move into the critical next stage, actually generating output. Putting all this learning into practice, putting rubber to the road and figuring out how to track that progress effectively.
Absolutely. Output is key. And this brings us straight to strategy number 8, practicing with real people and digital partners. All the solo learn, the listening, the reading aloud, the internal practice, it's incredibly powerful for building your foundation and internalizing structures. But it definitely has its limits. Ultimately, fluency is a performance skill. And a performance usually requires, an audience, or at least a counterpart, so someone to interact with, to respond to.
Yeah, and this is exactly where the anxiety often peaks for learners, isn't it? They feel like, oh, I'm not ready yet, my English isn't good enough, I'll make too many mistakes. They might fear being misunderstood or even ridiculed.
That fear is very real. So we need accessible options, starting points that feel less intimidating, lower pressure. The source material outlines several sort of tiers of interaction. The gold standard, obviously, is finding a dedicated language exchange partner, or maybe joining an online speaking club focused on a topic you enjoy.
Why is that the gold standard?
Because it provides genuine, spontaneous, dynamic conversation. You get unpredictable questions, you have to react in real time, and crucially, you get practice in negotiating meaning.
Negotiating meaning.
Yeah, like when you don't quite understand someone or they don't quite understand you and you have to use clarification strategies. Sorry, could you say that again? What does that word mean? So you're saying that. That's where you truly learn to communicate effectively under pressure.
Okay, but if that feels like too big a jump initially, or maybe finding a reliable partner is difficult, there are other options, more scalable ones.
Absolutely. The next tier down, which is becoming increasingly useful, is the digital partner. You can actually practice dialogues with the voice assistants. You probably already use Siri, Google Assistant, Alexa. Set them to English.
How does that help?
It provides a totally zero-judgment, low-stakes environment to practice basic interactions. You practice giving commands, set a timer for 5 minutes, asking factual questions, what's the capital of France, and getting simple, predictable responses. It just gets your mouth used to forming English sounds for commands, and your ears used to processing simple instructions and answers in English. It's basic, but it helps normalize speaking.
And what about more complex conversations?
Well, beyond the simple assistants, the rise of AI language tutors is huge now. There are platforms where you can have surprisingly complex, customized conversations about your interests, your opinions, all powered by AI. It adapts to your level, gives you feedback, and crucially, removes the social pressure entirely. You can practice complex interactions without worrying about another person's judgment.
Interesting. And then there's the final safety net, which the source mentions something that sounds maybe a bit odd at first, but is surprisingly effective. Self-talk.
Yeah, the ultimate solo output practice. Actually speaking to yourself.
Yeah.
Out loud. This isn't just the internal monologue we talked about earlier for thinking in English. This is articulated, voiced speech, using your vocal cords.
So literally talking to yourself as you go about your day.
Exactly. Describe the route you're walking down the street. Articulate your feelings about something you just read or watched. Plan tomorrow's schedule out loud in English.
Okay, first I need to, then I'll.
That's the point of that if no one's listening.
The key is simply building confidence and ensuring the physical mechanisms of your voice, your vocal cords, your breath control, your mouth muscles are regularly engaged in producing English sounds and sentences. It prepares the actual physical instrument for when you do have real conversations. It reduces that feeling of English being foreign in your own mouth. Okay, that makes sense. Warming up the engine.
Okay.
So once we start generating this output, whether it's with people, AI, or just ourselves, how do we actually monitor this whole massive effort? We need some kind of feedback loop, right? Which brings us to strategy number 9, the daily English journal. This might seem like just a simple writing task, but the sources suggest it serves a really powerful structural purpose.
It does. Writing actively improves your grammar and helps expand your applied vocabulary, mainly because it forces a different cognitive pace compared to speaking.
Right.
When you're speaking, you often rely on instinct, momentum. You might gloss over small grammatical errors because the listener is focused on the overall meaning and things move fast.
Right.
But when you write, you have to slow down. You have the time to actually consider your sentence structure, choose your words more deliberately, commit to a specific verb, tense, or preposition. It forces accuracy.
It solidifies the structure.
Exactly. It solidifies structural accuracy in a way that fleeting spoken errors might not.
And the source material is clear that this shouldn't become another source of stress or pressure, right? We're not talking about writing perfect essays every day.
No, absolutely not. Please don't think that. The advice is to start with micro-writing. Just aim for a few sentences daily. Write about something small, mundane even. What did you have for lunch? What are your 3 main goals for the afternoon? What did you think about that news story you read?
Keep it simple and achievable.
Very achievable. Because the real magic here isn't necessarily the literary quality of what you write each day. It's the long-term reward, the cumulative effect.
How so? What's the long-term reward?
The journal acts as your personal, tangible timeline of progress, your evolution in English.
So you look back at older entries.
That's the motivational goldmine. Use the journal to look back at entries you wrote, say, a month ago, or 3 months ago, or 6 months ago. You will physically see, right there in black and white, your improvements. You'll notice fewer basic mistakes. You'll see more complex sentence structures emerging naturally. You'll recognize a wider, more accurate range of vocabulary that you're now using comfortably.
That sounds powerful.
It is. This physical, quantifiable evidence of your own growth is one of the strongest weapons you have against that feeling of being stuck or plateauing. It proves to you that the effort is paying off.
That detailed focus on tracking progress and making it visible, that brings us really neatly into our final section. Because as you said, all the strategies in the world won't work if the mental game isn't strong. We absolutely have to address the psychological side of things, the motivation, the resilience, the barriers that can stop progress dead in its tracks.
Yes, the mental game is huge. And the first barrier, arguably the most crippling one for so many intermediate learners, is tackled in strategy number 10. Fear of mistakes is learning resistance. This is the point where the majority of learners who get stuck actually stall. They hold back in conversations. They might speak very quietly or just avoid speaking opportunities altogether. Why? Because of a deeply ingrained fear of making a mistake, of sounding wrong or foolish.
It's that perfectionism paralysis again, isn't it? The desire to be perfect stops you from being communicative. But the source material offers a really helpful way to reframe how we think about mistakes.
It does. Mistakes are not failures. They are proof. Proof that you are actively pushing the boundaries of what you currently know. They are essential data points for learning. Honestly, if you're not making any errors, you're probably not challenging yourself enough. You're staying in your comfort zone.
Good.
The goal of conversation, especially when you're learning, is not flawless, native-level accuracy right out of the gate. The immediate goal is simply effective, comprehensible communication. Can the other person understand your message? That's the primary win. You need to be understood, not perfect.
And we need to kind of normalize making errors, don't we? Not just accept them in ourselves, but just see it as a normal part of the whole language learning process.
Exactly. We have to prioritize bravery and just the sheer volume of practice over achieving flawless accuracy from day one. The critical mindset shift is this. Treat every error you notice or that someone points out immediately as a mini lesson. Acknowledge it, maybe quickly self-correct if you can, learn from it, and then move on. Don't dwell on it. Don't let the fear of a momentary grammatical slip-up prevent you from taking that essential leap into actually using the language in real conversations. That fear, it's purely internal resistance holding you back.
Embrace the errors as evidence of effort. I like that. Okay, and finally, strategy number 12 brings a necessary dose of reality, helping us sustain the effort over the long run. Patience and celebrating the journey. This acknowledges that learning English, achieving fluency, it's a marathon, definitely not a sprint, and we have to manage the inevitable emotional ups and downs along the way.
Yeah, it's the long-haul perspective, and honestly, it requires a certain level of emotional maturity. Language acquisition is inherently cyclical. It's not a smooth, linear progression upwards. The source material wisely points out that it's completely normal, expected, even to cycle through periods. You'll have weeks where you feel amazing, super confident, like everything is clicking.
Yeah, feeling fluent.
Exactly. And then you'll hit weeks, or maybe even longer periods, where you feel deeply frustrated, like you're stuck, maybe even going backwards, like you haven't progressed at all.
The dreaded plateau.
The plateau. Exactly. And learning how to manage your emotions and maintain your motivation during those plateau periods is a crucial skill for long-term success.
So what's the advice then? How do you sustain motivation when you hit that inevitable wall and feel like you're just not learning anything new anymore?
The key seems to be setting small, almost ridiculously achievable goals. Micro goals. Goals that prevent you from feeling overwhelmed and help maintain forward momentum, even if it feels slow. We're talking about goals you can realistically achieve within a single week. Things like successfully learn and try to use 5 new phrases from your phrase list. Finish reading just the first chapter of that challenging English novel you started. Or simply maintain your daily journal streak. Write something every day for 7 days straight.
Tiny wins.
Tiny, achievable wins, and this is vital. You must consciously celebrate every small measure of progress. Acknowledge it, give yourself credit, remind yourself why you started this journey in the first place, what your intrinsic motivation is.
That conscious celebration of the small stuff, that really seems like the key to building resilience for the long journey ahead. If you only focus on the huge end goal, the small setbacks can feel devastating. But if you acknowledge the small gains along the way...
Exactly. The big challenges feel much less insurmountable. You build resilience step by step. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow, okay. What a fantastic deep dive that was. 12 really powerful, distinct paths towards English fluency. And when you look at them all together like this, they really do seem to cluster quite neatly into those 3 essential pillars, don't they? Pillars that build on each other. Input, then internal processing, and finally, output.
Yeah, that's a great way to synthesize the blueprint. So, pillar 1, input. That's your foundation. It's all about consistency, that daily 15 minutes. Recognizing the primacy of listening. Creating true immersion by making English a lifestyle, and using things like subtitles strategically as a temporary bridge, not a crutch.
Right. Pillar 1 feeds Pillar 2, internal processing. This is where the cognitive magic happens. Using reading aloud to connect mind and mouth, building motor memory, actively working on escaping the translation trap, learning vocabulary in context, not isolation, and prioritizing learning phrases, those structural chunks of language, not just single words.
Exactly. And then Pillar 3, output. This is your action phase. Getting out there and practicing, ideally with real people, but also using those lower stakes digital partners or even self-talk. And crucially, tracking your progress visibly, maybe with something like that daily journal, see how far you've come.
And underpinning all 3 pillars, the absolute bedrock, the mental game. Strategy 11, embracing mistakes not as failures, but as necessary feedback. And strategy 12, cultivating patience, managing the plateaus, and celebrating every single step of the journey.
That really is the complete blueprint, pulled straight from all the source material we reviewed. But here's the most critical piece of actionable advice for you listening right now. Please do not try to implement all 12 of these strategies at the same time, starting tomorrow.
Yeah, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It's a guaranteed recipe for feeling completely overwhelmed and probably giving up within a week. Instant burnout. Instead, the strong suggestion is, look back at these 12 paths. Pick just 2, maybe 3, methods that really resonate with you right now. Where are you currently in your learning? What fits realistically into your daily life?
Start small, make it stick.
Exactly. Start immediately with just those 2 or 3. Focus on building consistency with them first. Build some momentum, make them a habit. Then, maybe later, you can consider adding another one.
That's how you build something lasting, a sustainable practice. If you're serious about really achieving fluency, it feels like all the tools you need are laid out right here.
They are. And perhaps here's a final provocative thought for you to consider, really building on that emphasis in the sources on daily application and tracking progress. Of these 12 methods we discussed, which one, for you personally, creates the clearest, most easily quantifiable metric of improvement? Where can you actually see the progress objectively?
Interesting question.
Is it the number of sentences you write in your journal each day? Is it the number of minutes you spend speaking with an AI tutor or a language partner? Is it successfully using 5 new phrases in conversation this week? Find that metric that works for you. Focus your initial energy where you can actually see visible, non-subjective growth. Because if you can see that graph of progress, however small, ticking upwards, your motivation and your resilience will almost certainly follow.
That's a fantastic challenge. Find your metric, focus your effort, time to put these paths into practice. Thank you so much for diving deep with us today on this.
My pleasure. It's a crucial topic.